What would make a loving husband and devoted father simply vanish without a trace? Michael Shaver was the kind of man who seemed to have it all. A beautiful family, a fulfilling career, and a reputation as someone others could always count on. But in late 2015, without warning, Michael disappeared. No goodbyes, no explanations, just silence. His sudden absence left his loved ones reeling and his community in shock, grappling with questions that no one could answer. To those who knew him, Michael's life seemed picture perfect. A skilled mechanic and former pilot, he was deeply admired for his work ethic and devotion to his family. Friends described him as dependable, kind-hearted, and full of life, the kind of man who lit up every room he entered. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months after his disappearance, an unsettling truth began to emerge. Michael's life wasn't as perfect as it seemed. Behind closed doors, cracks had begun to form in the foundation of his marriage to Laurie Paddleford, the high school sweetheart he had once adored. Their love story, which began with youthful excitement and dreams of a bright future together, had grown strained over the years. Arguments became more frequent, suspicions festered. And while they worked hard to maintain the image of a happy family for their two children, Isabel and Aidan, those closest to them began noticing troubling signs that something wasn't right. In the months leading up to his disappearance, friends observed subtle but significant changes in Michael's demeanor. The vibrant man they once knew seemed quieter, more withdrawn, a shadow of his former self. Conversations with him grew strained, as though he was carrying a burden too heavy to share. And then there were the arguments. Neighbors reported hearing raised voices coming from the Shaver household late at night. These weren't ordinary disagreements. They hinted at deeper issues brewing beneath the surface. When Michael vanished without explanation, those who loved him were left grappling with impossible questions. Did he leave willingly? Was he running from something or someone? Or was his disappearance part of something far more sinister? As investigators began piecing together the events leading up to that fateful moment, they uncovered a web of secrets that would challenge everything anyone thought they knew about Michael Shaver. But before we can unravel what happened to Michael, before we can understand how a man so loved could simply disappear, we must first go back. Back to the life he built with Laurie Paddleford. Back to the love they shared and the fractures that began to form beneath their seemingly perfect family life. What dark secrets will come to light about the life he left behind? And how could everything have gone so wrong for a man who seemed to have it all? Michael Shaver was born in the small village of Lawrence, New York, where laughter and adventure filled his childhood days. As the third child in a close-knit family, he spent countless hours riding bikes with friends and tinkering with anything that had wheels or wings. From an early age, Michael exhibited a natural talent for mechanics, often fixing broken bicycles or building makeshift contraptions in his backyard. This hands-on approach to life would later lead him to pursue his passion for aviation. His fascination with flying began in high school, where he met Laurie Paddleford. Their romance blossomed during those formative years, and it wasn't long before they became inseparable. Friends recall Michael's nervous excitement when he first asked Laurie out, orchestrating a grand gesture with the help of music and friends. Their bond deepened over time, culminating in a beautiful wedding that symbolized their commitment to each other. After starting a family, Michael and Laurie moved to Claremont, Florida, seeking a fresh start. They settled into a charming home on 5 acres of land surrounded by picturesque lakes and rolling hills. Here they welcomed 2 children, Isabel and Aidan, into their lives. Michael embraced fatherhood wholeheartedly, often engaging in outdoor activities with his kids and nurturing their interests just as his parents had done for him. But beneath this idyllic facade lay brewing tensions that few could see. As Michael transitioned from his job as a commercial pilot to working as a mechanic at Disney, the pressures of providing for his family began to weigh heavily on him. He loved his job, but found himself working long hours away from home, which strained his relationship with Laurie. Friends began to notice changes in Michael's demeanor. He seemed more withdrawn and anxious. Conversations that once flowed easily became strained as he struggled to articulate his feelings about the mounting pressures at home and work. Those closest to him sensed that something was amiss, but couldn't pinpoint what was causing his distress. Despite their efforts to maintain a happy family life, cracks began to show in Michael and Laurie's marriage. Arguments erupted behind closed doors, often escalating into heated confrontations that left both parties emotionally drained. Neighbors would later recount hearing raised voices coming from the Shaver household, a stark contrast to the laughter they once associated with the family. Yet even amid this turmoil, there were moments of hope. Friends observed times when Michael and Laurie seemed to reconnect during family outings or community events. They would laugh together at tractor shows or share quiet moments watching their children play. But these fleeting glimpses of happiness were overshadowed by an undercurrent of tension that threatened to pull them apart. As we delve deeper into Michael's life before his disappearance, it becomes clear that the love they shared was intertwined with misunderstandings and unspoken fears. The question now looms: what really happened behind those closed doors? What secrets were lurking beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life? What begins as a fairy tale often doesn't end that way. For Michael Shaver and Laurie Paddleford, the cracks in their foundation were subtle at first. Small disagreements, fleeting silences. But over time, those cracks deepened into fractures that neither could ignore. What started as occasional arguments between childhood sweethearts spiraled into something far more volatile, leaving friends and family questioning everything they thought they knew about the couple. In the years leading up to Michael's disappearance, those closest to him began noticing a change. Once outgoing and full of life, Michael became withdrawn and distant. His easy smile faded, replaced by a heaviness that seemed to weigh on him constantly. Friends described him as a shell of his former self, burdened by an invisible weight he couldn't seem to share. He stopped reaching out as often, and when he did, his words were measured and cautious, as if he was afraid of saying too much. But the tension wasn't confined to whispers behind closed doors. Neighbors began hearing louder arguments coming from the Shaver household, arguments that grew more frequent and intense with each passing week. One neighbor later recalled hearing shouting so heated that she felt compelled to ask Laurie if everything was okay. Laurie always brushed it off with a smile, insisting things were fine. But behind her reassurances lay a reality far more complicated than anyone could have imagined. Police records reveal that their fights often turned physical. In September 2014, one such altercation escalated into violence so severe that Laurie called 911 in a panic. Her voice on the recording was frantic as she described how Michael had grabbed her car keys to prevent her from leaving with their children after an argument. She claimed she acted in self-defense during the ensuing fight, but Michael's version of events told a very different story. He alleged that Laurie had initiated the violence, threatening both his life and her own in a fit of rage. He admitted taking her keys, but insisted it was only because he feared for their children's safety after she had been drinking. Both sides accused each other of being the aggressor, leaving law enforcement unable to determine who was telling the truth. Photographs taken shortly after the incident show Michael with blood streaming down his face, a stark contrast to the calm and collected man his friends had known for years. Despite his injuries, it was Michael who was arrested that night for battery after admitting he had grabbed Laurie during their struggle. The charges were later dropped due to lack of evidence. But the incident marked a significant turning point in their relationship, a moment from which they would never fully recover. A judge issued a no-contact order against Michael, forcing him out of their home and into temporary living arrangements at an airplane hangar where he worked as a mechanic. Friends who visited him during this time described a man trying desperately to hold his life together while living out of a makeshift space filled with couches and tools. Despite everything, Michael clung to hope. Hope that he could reconcile with Laurie and rebuild their family for the sake of their children. But even as he tried to move forward, doubts began creeping into Michael's mind. Doubts about Laurie's fidelity during their separations. Friends recalled how he became increasingly paranoid about strangers visiting their home when he wasn't there. In one instance, Michael went so far as to fly over his own house in a small plane just to see whose car was parked in the driveway. Despite these suspicions, Michael repeatedly returned home whenever Laurie asked him to reconcile. Friends say he was willing to forgive anything if it meant keeping his family together, a testament to how deeply he loved his children and wanted to make things work. But this cycle of separation and reconciliation took its toll on Michael's mental health and strained his relationships with others. Family members recall being turned away when they tried to visit him in Florida, always at Laurie's insistence that it wasn't a good time. Over time, communication from Michael became less frequent till it stopped altogether. And then in late 2015, Michael simply vanished without explanation. No goodbyes, no warnings, just silence. Was this really a man who walked away from everything, or was something far more disturbing at play? Although before that, tensions reached their breaking point between Michael and Laurie, one fateful night would alter everything, and leave those closest to them searching for answers they may never find. On a fateful night in September 2014, an altercation shattered the fragile facade of the Shaver household. What began as a typical evening quickly escalated into chaos, a violent confrontation that would change everything for Michael and Laurie. Friends and family had long suspected that the tensions between the couple were reaching a breaking point, but no one could have predicted the events that would unfold that night. It was a Friday evening when the police received a frantic call from Laurie. Her voice was filled with fear and desperation as she reported an ongoing domestic dispute. "I grabbed my gun because he has a gun," she told the 911 operator, her words punctuated by sobs. That was the night of the car key incident. The dispatcher could hear the panic in her voice as she recounted how Michael had taken her car keys to prevent her from leaving with their children after an argument. When officers arrived at their home, they found Michael covered in blood, his clothes torn and disheveled. He had opened the door to his friend Frank, who had rushed over after receiving a call for help. Frank later recounted how shocking it was to see Michael in such a state, a stark contrast to the man he had known for years. He looked like he had been through hell, Frank recalled. There was blood streaming down his face, and he was clearly shaken. The police were met with conflicting narratives from both Michael and Laurie. While Laurie claimed she acted in self-defense, asserting that Michael had threatened her life during their argument, Michael painted a different picture altogether. He insisted that Laurie was the aggressor, alleging that she had pulled a gun on him during their struggle. Both accounts were filled with accusations and blame, leaving law enforcement unable to determine who was truly at fault. During the investigation, police discovered evidence of alcohol consumption that night. Both Michael and Laurie admitted to having several drinks earlier in the evening. This detail would later complicate their stories further, as it raised questions about their judgment during the altercation. As officers pieced together the events of that night, they learned that both parties had been drinking heavily, which likely contributed to the escalation of violence. Ultimately, police arrested Michael for battery after he admitted to grabbing Laurie during their struggle. Although he was later released when charges were dropped due to lack of evidence, the incident marked a significant turning point in their relationship. Friends close to them observed that this event deepened the rift between Michael and Laurie, pushing them further apart even as they attempted to reconcile. After this violent night, both Michael and Laurie began pointing fingers at each other. Friends who witnessed their relationship firsthand noted how each tried to portray themselves as the victim while demonizing the other. It became a game of blame, one friend remarked. Neither of them wanted to take responsibility for what happened. In the aftermath of this violent confrontation, Michael found himself living in an airplane hangar where he worked as a mechanic, an attempt to escape the chaos at home while still being close enough to see his children. He hoped that time apart would allow both him and Laurie to reflect on their relationship and perhaps find a way back to each other. But even as he attempted to rebuild his life away from home, whispers of suspicion began to cloud his mind. Friends noted that Michael became increasingly paranoid about Laurie's fidelity during their separations. He suspected she was seeing other men while he was gone, a fear that only intensified his emotional turmoil. Despite these suspicions, Michael continued to reach out to Laurie in hopes of salvaging their marriage. He wanted desperately to believe that they could overcome their challenges for the sake of their children, Isabel and Aidan, whom he adored deeply. With tensions at an all-time high following this violent confrontation, could this violence have driven Michael to disappear? Where would he go if he chose to leave everything behind? In the fall of 2015, Michael Shaver seemingly vanished without a trace. Friends and family members who had known him for years began to notice his absence, and with each passing day, their concern grew deeper. Michael Shaver, once a vibrant and engaged father, had become a ghost in his own life. No goodbyes, no explanations, just silence. Those closest to Michael recounted the last known sightings and communications with him. Frank Merritt, a lifelong friend, vividly remembers the last time he saw Michael at a local tractor show just weeks before he disappeared. It was a hot day, Frank recalled. We were all there, but something felt off. Laurie wouldn't make eye contact with us. She was unusually distant. As whispers of concern spread through Claremont about Michael's sudden absence, questions lingered. What happened during those final days? Did someone know more than they were letting on? And most importantly, where was Michael Shaver? Friends and family members who had known Michael Shaver for years began to notice his absence almost immediately. What had once been a lively presence in their lives was now replaced by an unsettling void. As the days turned into weeks, the community of Claremont, Florida, was left grappling with the reality that one of their own had vanished without a trace. The initial shock quickly morphed into a collective anxiety, as loved ones struggled to comprehend how someone so beloved could simply disappear. The investigation into Michael's disappearance unfolded slowly, with authorities combing through every detail of his life. They interviewed friends and family, piecing together the last moments leading up to his vanishing. The police explored every lead, but as time passed, hope began to wane. Was Michael truly gone forever, or was he hiding in plain sight? These questions haunted those who loved him, each unanswered query deepening their sense of loss. As investigators delved deeper into Michael's life, they uncovered layers of complexity that painted a picture of a man under immense pressure. Friends recounted the troubling changes they had observed in him over the years, the withdrawal, the anxiety, and the mounting fears about his marriage. They recalled how Michael had confided in them about his struggles with Laurie, and how he felt increasingly isolated in his own home. Meanwhile, Laurie Paddleford faced her own scrutiny as questions arose about her involvement in Michael's disappearance. Some friends speculated about whether she knew more than she let on, while others defended her as a grieving wife, trying to cope with the sudden loss of her husband. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that both Michael and Laurie were caught in a web of emotional turmoil that had spiraled out of control. The community rallied around Michael's family, organizing search parties and vigils in hopes of finding answers. Yet with each passing day, the uncertainty weighed heavily on their hearts. Isabel and Aidan, once filled with laughter and joy, now faced the harsh reality of growing up without their father. Friends and family struggled to maintain a semblance of normalcy while grappling with the profound grief that enveloped them. As theories about what happened to Michael circulated among friends and neighbors, one question loomed larger than all others. What really happened on that fateful day when he disappeared? Was it a tragic accident? A deliberate choice? Or something far more threatening? With every lead that fizzled out and every unanswered question that lingered in the air, the search for closure became increasingly desperate. The emotional stakes were palpable. Each person involved was left wrestling with their own guilt and regret over what they could have done differently. As we reflect on Michael Shaver's story, a tale marked by love, loss, and unanswered questions, we are left wondering. Was he truly gone forever, or was he hiding in plain sight? The mystery remains unsolved, leaving those who loved him still searching for answers in a world where certainty has become elusive. In this complex narrative of love and tragedy, one thing is clear. Michael Shaver's Disappearance is not just a story about a man who vanished. It is a poignant reminder of how quickly life can change and how deeply those left behind can feel the void. As we continue to seek answers in this heartbreaking case, we are reminded that sometimes the truth is just as elusive as the person we seek. Please subscribe now. The next chapter won't just keep you on the edge of your seat. It's the one you'll need to hear most. Don't miss out on gripping, thought-provoking stories that uncover truths, inspire change, and demand to be told. Hit that subscribe button today and join a community that thrives on powerful narratives, because the best is yet to come, and you won't want to miss a moment.